You said, what year did you graduate?
1982.
And you studied sociology and comparative literature?
Correct.
Were you part of any campus organizations or extracurricular activities?
Um, I wrote for the Spectator,
Okay.
but I wasn't really involved in it. And otherwise, no, I wasn't.
Okay. Were you out while you were at Hamilton?
I was not.
Are you out now?
Yes.
While you were at Hamilton, what was the climate like for LGBT students?
Um, I thought it was uncomfortable, bordering on hostile.
How so?
I there was a fear that if you were identified as gay and there was a raucous fraternity party, that you could be beaten up.
Wow. Did any of that happen while you were there?
Not that I was aware of, but here's a story that I had told your professor. I wrote this piece for the New York Times a few years ago about coming to my 25th reunion and being out. And when I wrote this piece for the New York Times, I had written, it was an op-ed, an opinion for the Sunday Review.
Yeah.
And I had written that the gay and lesbian organizations meetings were held in secret. And the editors of the Times said something at the last minute. I decided I needed to confirm that. I have a good memory, so that was my memory.
Yeah.
And I called a few people, and someone said, well, call this person, call that person. And someone said, well, in 1979, there were definitely people, there was a group, and they were out about it. So, but I distinctly had remembered that there was, I guess it was a notice in the Spectator saying, if you were interested in attending a meeting of the gay and lesbian group, whatever it was called, you should contact the college chaplain by campus mail. Okay. And you would then receive a letter in an unmarked envelope telling you where the meeting was. Okay. So I couldn't find anyone to confirm this. I finally tracked down the chaplain somehow, through Googling. I found him. I believe he was in New Jersey. Yeah. And he confirmed for me my memory. So that, sort of suggested to me that I was right, that this idea that you did not want, if you were going to go to a meeting of gay and lesbian students, you needed to do it in secret. Okay. Yes, and I felt that there could be, some sort of violent, physical response to that. I mean, it wasn't just because of privacy concerns. There were safety concerns in my mind. Okay. Where was the meeting held? I never went, so I don't know. Okay. What would you say is the most difficult part, or was the most difficult part of being LGBT at Hamilton during your time there? Well, as you know, I mean, it's a very isolated place. There were no public LGBT events. There was no outreach of any type. But that was, so at that time, if I had been at a urban university, there would have been, I know there were groups at urban, and you would have had proximity to bars or nightclubs.
Yeah.
So you had none of that at Hamilton. You had a very, you know, it as I said, it had just only gone coeducational. Oh, can you hold on 1 second?
Yeah.
Hi. Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you and Anne were talking. I'm sorry. Okay, bye.
Hi, sorry.
No worries.
So what I was going to say is that, so as I was saying, this is the first year of coeducation, of the schools being combined. And certainly Hamilton had a very kind of, you know, preppy, you know, several of the fraternities were very kind of rowdy, macho places, not all of them. And it wasn't an issue that was discussed. I mean, it wasn't something that people talked about.
Really? There wasn't much dialogue about it?
But there wasn't much, you know, dialogue. I mean, there was very little in popular culture or anywhere about gays and lesbians at that time. So it didn't really seem unusual. It wasn't unusual.
Were there any like highlights, do you think, of being LGBT at Hamilton?
Highlights? None. No.
Okay. Did you engage in any activism while you're on campus or off campus?
No.
Okay. So I have a few questions about being LGBT after Hamilton. So what impact did it have on your work life?
Being LGBT?
Being gay.
Is that what you're asking? Yeah. On my work life. I would say that it made me very focused on work, very much wanting to find a sense of security from my work, a sense of self, a sense of being liked and respected.
So how did being gay play into that?
Well, I was in the closet then, but it was a sense of wanting all those things to sort of give me the courage to come out.
Okay, I see. Okay, that makes sense. How about your relationship with your family? How did being gay impact that? I mean, once I came out to my parents and my sister, it was easy and fine, but it was something I had a lot of trepidation about. Sure.
And also just, you know, at that time, the 1980s, it was the AIDS crisis, and being gay, you know, and sexually active was synonymous with the risk of dying.
Right.
So that the first thing people would say to me when I came out was, I hope you're being safe. That was the first phrase out of their mouths.
Wow. And was that your family's response?
Well, not literally, but I know that was a great fear
you know, the fear that I would get AIDS if I were sexually active.
Right. Was that kind of the same in your social life when you were coming out?
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, I mean, I've gone back and done some research, and 2 weeks before I graduated was really the first, I think it was the 5th article the New York Times ever published about AIDS, but it was definitely the first that really made it very clear that, without being able to definitively say so at the time, that it was a sexually transmitted disease.
Okay.
So that had a great impact on me.
Right. And did that have an impact on like your relationships with friends and coworkers?
Yeah, well, the fact that it made me not really want to come out, and therefore I was always kind of holding a secret with people. So it motivated me to, as I said before, to win people's respect and affection.
Yeah.
So it didn't actually have any negative effect on my work life.
Okay. When did you come out? How old were you?
29.
Okay. And was that when you started coming out, or is that when you came out completely?
That came out completely.
Okay. Did coming out have much impact on your spiritual life?
My spiritual life. No, I mean, many years later, I went to sort of gay men's spiritual retreats, but not then.
Okay. Do you consider yourself religious at all? I know you said you weren't affiliated with an organization.
No, I mean, I'm culturally Jewish, but not religious.
Okay. Do you feel like there's anything? Oh, I have one more question. What do you think the biggest challenges are facing the LGBT community today?
I guess various forms of discrimination.
Sure.
Yeah, and equal treatment under the law.
Okay. Is there anything we missed or anything you want to add to this interview?
You know, I would just sort of add that at the time I was at Hamilton, I mean, I'm not sure queer theory may have existed, but it was certainly nothing talked about. I mean,
right.
There wasn't formal women's studies.
Okay. Yeah.
I believe, and in fact, there was this Eve Sedgwick, I forget her middle name, but who wrote some very famous text in the late 80s about being gay.
Okay.
Was a visiting professor in the comp lit department. And,
oh, really?
And I took a course with her, and I don't have any recollection that there was ever any recognition or acknowledgement that she was lesbian.
Okay. Interesting.
I mean, I don't remember anyone even speculating. I mean, certainly I don't know if there were any if any of the professors at that time were gay or lesbian, I have no recollection of anybody, being out.
Okay. None of the professors were out. Did you know many students who were out?
No.
Okay.
Um,
Is there anything else you want to add to the interview?
what else could I say about Hamilton? I would just say that it was not, being gay and lesbian was not a big political issue then.
Because
it was really the.
Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say. I mean, I know I sound kind of like a broken record, but really, it was the AIDS crisis that politicized the gay and lesbian community. So, it's a completely different time. It was the moment that was like it was it was sort of the very waning days at Hamilton, at least, of like sort of a hippie culture, and really it was the ascent. It was the when I was in college, the Preppy Handbook was published, and it was a very, Reagan was elected. It became a conservative time.
Okay.
So I think just Hamilton reflected, the sort of the society at large.
Sure. So you're saying it wasn't really even a political issue because there wasn't really any recognition of it at that point?
Yeah, well, I mean, nobody was, there were no sort of civil rights issues being discussed. I mean, at that point. So I guess in cities there was sort of, there were gay pride marches, but even in New York City, there was still discrimination in housing, and
really
people could be evicted. Anyway, I think just, the only political issue at that point was I think even coming out was not seen as political at that point in history.
Okay.
It was just seen as a personal choice. It wasn't seen as part of some bigger. You were part of some bigger movement.
Sure. Do you see coming out as political now?
I think, yeah, I mean, it can be. It doesn't have to be, but it's certainly, I think because there are political issues that everyone can confront. I mean, there's going to be the Supreme Court case about the Colorado bakers refusing to bake a cake for LGBT couple. So, and the transgender bathroom question. So yeah, I mean, I think that to be gay is to be political now. In some, you can't not be.
Interesting.
In some way political.
Yeah. Have you heard of the whole light side, dark side split that exists now at Hamilton?
No, what is that?
The light side is what it was traditionally Hamilton, and the dark side is what was traditionally Kirkland. And there's still very much an identity of light side or dark side. And dark side Kirkland is seen as much more progressive, much more, the word now is hipster. But I think almost all women's studies majors would identify with Kirkland and would identify as dark side. which is interesting. That was the thing
But,
back.
but what I'm curious about is why is it called the dark side?
I don't know the history of that. I never thought about that. That's very interesting. I don't know why it's called the dark side.
Yeah, and it's also, I was just thinking, I mean, back in that day, it was like a safe, in a way, although nobody used terms like safe space back then, it didn't exist. But certainly the Kirkland campus, since all the fraternities, which don't exist anymore, right?
Yeah.
Since all the fraternities were on the Hamilton campus,
Right.
and where people would be at 2 a.m, drunk out of their minds.
Yeah.
The Kirkland side, without those parties, was a very mellow, easy place to be.
Sure. Yeah, I think a lot of that is still preserved today, like that duality.
I mean, it's very, that always is, I think is one of the fascinating things about Hamilton is that that's persisted, that, and from talking to people who've gone to, sort of the peer liberal arts colleges, Hamilton sounds like it's more of it really has these two personalities more than any of these other similar colleges.
It really does. It really does. There's this like conservative presence, and there's the very liberal presence of the dark side. It's very interesting.
And they did say, I don't know, there was this idea that, and sort of more like as a quip than, that Kirkland students had been these sort of like Jewish lesbians from New York City, and and Hamilton. One of the reasons that Hamilton and Kirkland hadn't really meshed as separate places, because you did have that sort of New York lesbian Jewish population, and then you had this very kind of preppy, mostly from upstate New York,
sure,
Hamilton and prep school population, and
yeah.
So in terms of like a sort of, there was that vague sense that there was probably had been somewhat of a lesbian community at Kirkland.
Okay.
But that's kind of just a supposition.
Sure. Okay, interesting. Do you have any other questions or things you want to add?
I don't think so.